the SM Media Podcast Network.
Hi folks, and welcome to your end of season episode of the Celtic Report here on SM Media, where we take a look at all things Celtic. And we are at the end of another what has been a storied season for the club. And I'm Scott Pike. It's always a pleasure to be your host as always, and to join me to look back on quite an interesting season from a Celtic perspective. First of all, it's a pleasure to welcome Stuart Ross.
Thanks for having me back on, Scott.
Always a pleasure, mate, and it's a delight to be joined by Ryan Clifford.
Pleasure's always, Scott. Thanks a lot, mate. Cheers.
No worries. Stuart, if we'd recorded this podcast 10 days ago, how would we have been feeling? And how are we feeling now?
Like talking about Scottish Cup final, maybe, are you? I get what you mean. Obviously it's the last game of the season. It's to wrap up a treble, so obviously there's disappointment that didn't come to fruition, but I still don't think that should take away from the whole season. I think obviously it's a disappointment, and I think probably maybe going in a bit more details or kind of going through the signs. The second part of the season probably wasn't quite up to the kind of standard that we saw in the first part. But I think on the whole, still a really successful season. I think some of the football in that first part of the season was really good in Europe as well. So yeah, I think it does. What you're kind of driving at there, it does maybe take a wee bit of the edge off, and obviously a sore one last weekend. But I think in the main, still relatively positive about the season and positive about going into next season too.
Ryan, I saw a few people saying on social media, and after a defeat like that, it can be quite a volatile place, as we know. I saw a lot of people say, "Oh, it's taken away the season being successful." Do folk really believe that?
I think it's obviously emotions after the game. It's when you take obviously a lot of people obviously maybe alcohol intended after the game, and people know they're looking at the highlights and everything else, and you go home and you're thinking it's a bad defeat, or we've won a treble, but when you look at it, you've no divine right to win any cup, any treble. You've still got to turn up and win. And I think Stuart probably agree. We didn't turn up on the day to really put a stamp on the game. So it's disappointing, as Stuart said there, that we didn't get the victory. And probably as Celtic fans, I were pretty confident, but you've obviously still got to show respect to Aberdeen. But considering the aggregate scores of the season, the game at Pittodrie, you were going to that game be pretty confident we go and win the game. But no, I think it's still a successful season, still to win a double. Doesn't matter how many finances you've got or the manager you've got, the players you've got, you've still got to turn up and do the job. So the Celtic have done that, and probably for the last 20 years have been very, very dominant. So it's not a surprise we've done it, but it's maybe just a wee tiny bit of disappointment not to get the treble done, but it's still a successful season. Get to a semi-final, still a final. Losing is no great, but still getting there and having the opportunity to do it. It's still a successful season for me anyway, Scott.
Stuart, in terms of the kind of cup final, you said there it was perhaps an off day. What kind of went wrong? Because it felt like a kind of cup final at the end of the season where I think both sides were quite leggy, quite jaded at times, but I also felt Celtic did have chances, particularly in the first half, where I thought Aberdeen's kind of approach the first half was let's just get in here, let's just get in here at least if we can get a goal in the second half, we've still got a chance. And I felt the second half, Celtic just looked complete. It looked like Celtic, not that their season had ended, but they just felt as if they were out of legs in most cases. Is that fair, or is there more to it than that?
I think it probably felt like, and watching the game, maybe felt 1-0 was going to be enough. Given the way Aberdeen had played, that Tillian obviously was they won the cup in the end. That maybe gets over exaggerated, but he has to get a bit of credit for the way they set up. Changing, not played that system the whole season to set it up, but that's not a kind of setup that Celtic are not used to coming up against. So that shouldn't have been anything to do with it. Obviously, they were well organised, but they offered nothing with the ball, certainly for that first half of Aberdeen. There wasn't really a threat. So I think once we got that first one, there was just a kind of expectation that it's very unlikely Aberdeen are going to get, going to even look like they were going to have a period of sustained pressure on the Celtic goal. If Engels hits the post, I think obviously because it's a cup final, it's an emotional one, and I think when you look back at it, maybe a week past, you look back, Celtic would win that game 1-0, 2-0, nine times out of 10. But it's a cup final, last game of the season, and then it can happen, and that's kind of what happened because if Schmeichel just picks that one up or doesn't have the kind of howler that he does, then you didn't see Aberdeen having, because obviously that gives them the life the rest of the game, something to hold on for. And like you said, I think Celtic maybe just running on fumes a wee bit, bench looking a wee bit light, lost a couple of probably the biggest creative sparks in the team in Hatate and Jota, before it. Then yeah, there's just a few things that went wrong on the day in the lead up that just kind of made it happen. But I think probably less worried a week after, and there's still things that come up during that game that I think will be talked about over the summer and into next season as well. But in terms of what went wrong that day, I think just a bit of legginess, but I'm struggling to break that kind of thing down that we've been faced with before. But I think there just wasn't enough of that kind of third man running, breaking the lines, just a wee bit tepid, a wee bit, could have went for it, but at the same time, we're going, Aberdeen aren't offering enough, so they were, Celtic were comfortable in the game for so long. So yeah, just one of those days. Schmeichel's probably not made a mistake the entire first season with Celtic up until that point. It's just unfortunate it comes at that time. So yeah, unfortunately, had the luck in the penalty shootout in the League Cup final as well. So maybe can't be too greedy.
Ryan, there was a couple of moments in the game. Obviously, Stuart said Celtic were relatively comfortable in the ball first half, but without that kind of penetration. I don't think Celtic had a shot on target the first half, and obviously score a bit of luck. Obviously comes through the own goal when Engels obviously hits the post, and then a couple of minutes after that, I remember turning to I was watching it with and saying Aberdeen didn't to me feel as if they were in any sort of rhythm at all. And then, a couple of minutes after that, they seemed to just pick it up a gear. I don't know whether that was just Celtic taking their foot off a wee bit. I don't know what it was, but it just felt after that Aberdeen were beginning to get a foothold in the game. And then, obviously, they got a bit of luck as well. But, getting into injury time, Maeda's chance as well, where he hits Mitov pulls off a magnificent save, you just felt at that point, it was if this was the day for Celtic, that would have been it. It was that again. I'm looking at it from a kind of different perspective. It just felt to me Celtic, despite being in control of the ball, it just felt like one of those days, and they haven't been the case against Aberdeen because I think we were talking off here 17-1. I think Celtic were against Aberdeen in the last 4 games. To me, it just feels that end of the season where yes, it's a treble, but it's another game. It's part of packed season. It just felt as if Celtic were on fumes, as Stuart said.
No, I agree. With your first comment and Stuart's. I thought it just lacked a bit of quality. It was leggy. It was like an end of season. That should have been an end of season showpiece, and it didn't look like that. 2 teams looked tired, and I don't want to. It's maybe my harsh saying this after a long season because I know the guys play at a level that's every day you need to be your best and stuff. But for a few months now, Celtic, barring I think they gave it Pittodrie, they've been playing once a week, so they shouldn't really be too tired, if that makes sense. Maybe I've been harsh, I don't know. Tell me, lads, if I'm wrong, but I know at that level you're playing at, it's a ridiculous level you're playing at, but if you're getting enough rest and recuperation, you should be able to put one last big effort, especially with a treble on the line. So maybe it's just disappointing that I'm saying that. Maybe it's just my Celtic hat saying we should be going and winning and going to get the treble. But I probably agree there. It was leggy. We lacked a bit of quality. I don't know if it was, but it just seems to be, see, when no matter who we play, when they play like that, i.e. Aberdeen, we seem to struggle to break it down. I don't know if that's Rodgers, he's not got a plan B or he's going to adapt to certain players, but I think it shows you that maybe the bench is definitely no, the squad isn't as strong as we think it is. A few injuries, our top players, and again, it's no. I think Bernardo's a brilliant player, but he looked like a game time. McKibben came on, didn't impress. I'm a fan of Engels, didn't turn up. Either for me, I think he's got to do a lot more than what he's doing. I know he's getting 20 goals or so, which is brilliant for a striker. You can't criticise that, but his overall play, I thought, for if you want to call it number 9 in a final, I thought he was a statue of person, Scott. Again, if that's harsh, people can tell me I'm harsh, but I just thought we just wanted to be a bit better in the final third, especially. I think we looked comfortable, as you just said, in defence, apart from the howler, as Stuart says. Celtic were pretty comfortable, and again, maybe I've been harsh, but if Greg Taylor stops that cross, Schmeichel's not getting that chance to make the howler. But even if Greg Taylor doesn't do that defensive work, right or wrong, Schmeichel's got to save that. But then the question of his fitness as well, was Schmeichel even fit? Because he was guarding his shoulder quite a bit during the game, so that's sort of the questions we can all debate now. But yeah, I think listen, there's no excuses for me. We were no really great in the day. As Stuart says, maybe we got the luck for the last game at hand and then the penalty shootout, and maybe it just wasn't to be. But I think it definitely ponders some questions in terms of squad depth, and maybe you do need to add to the team because you can't stay still. And as much as won the double and we've won the league by so many points, you can't just rest your laurels. You need to go and probably spend a bit more money than last year to keep going, because we know there's other teams in the league, even Hearts, Aberdeen, they'll probably spend as well. There's that takeover now, so they'll have a wee bit more money than they have before. So I got been interested to see what happens in the summer regarding Celtic and transfers.
Sure, I think Ryan brings up an interesting point about kind of squad depth, and it's maybe something we can visit later on in the show. But like, it gets to that end of the season where, like, I felt like Forrest comes on at 65 minutes. I don't know what Rodgers thinks, if it's just the Forrest just isn't having a good day, or he thinks like, oh, I need to fling on another striker. But he brings on Kenny for Forrest at 96 minutes. Is Kenny the guy in that scenario you would want? I know there's still maybe a lot to learn, but Schlupp comes on. It just felt as if at the end and injury time and into extra time, it was just it turned into like, let's just throw the system out here. But it's a cup final. But to me, it was points, and I know it's a cup final, and I know it's late in the game. You're just looking for a winner, but to me, there was absolutely no shape at the end at all with Celtic. It just looked all over the shop.
I think there was a bit of that. I think what Ryan was talking about there in terms of struggling to break down, I think there's maybe a mental tiredness, and that's maybe what we've seen that whole the kind of whole of the second, not the whole of the second part of the season, but maybe gradually. So I think once the Champions League's kind of out the road, I think for a lot of these guys, the younger, the biggest talents in the team, that's what they want to be there for, and well, that's what every player wants to be there for. So that's what motivates these guys, because they see that's their stepping stone. And when that's not there, I think for, like saying, when we only play once a week, we, expect, but I think it's that, it's been a long, 60 odd, almost 60 games, not playing, at that top level for a few months, then you can come off it a bit. So I understand that. But I think there's that, and I think there's also, obviously, let's mention a couple of injuries in terms of Hatate and Jota. I think injury-wise, not too bad this season. Can't really have too many complaints. But I think that's January catching up a wee bit as well in terms of not going out and getting that other striker that would have given you some. No, nothing against Johnny Kenny. I think he's a decent young striker who probably going to have a good career. I don't know whether that's going to be at Celtic. But if you'd had another striker that you've been bedded in for 4 or 5 months coming off the bench to replace Kyogo, it might not have been ahead of either, but at least a different option coming on there. Then maybe we've done again another winger that was talked about anyway. So yeah, I think that maybe January catching up a wee bit as well. But so hopefully those kind of things can be addressed over the summer. But I think just ultimately just one of those days in terms of cup final. But some food for thought in terms of the squad as well. Like Ryan says.
And Ryan, obviously, is that is that a difficulty when you're? I mean, Celtic were so comfortable in the league. To be honest, it was like, I mean, I think they lost one game in the first half of the season. It was the Dortmund game. Do you know what I mean? So there was absolutely no like doubt about how incredibly solid and consistent Celtic were in the first half of the season. But as Stuart says, when it got to that kind of second half, jobs done in the League Cup had been won. You're trying to just get up for these Scottish Cup games, the two games in Europe. It's very difficult to maintain that when you get to the end of the season where, yeah, obviously there's still that 100% effort you're requiring, but the intensity isn't there. So to get up for a one-off game when pretty much what every game apart from the cup semi-finals was pretty much not meaningless, but I mean the intensity didn't need to be there. It's harder than people think. I kind of take that. I know people obviously say, I think Liverpool, like a good example of that was Liverpool as well in the Premier League. Like there was a stage where you thought the league was won and they were just limping through, and they went out of the Champions League. Like it just felt as if they are like the cup final they had with Newcastle as well. Like I thought a wee bit of that as well. It's like the league's done. It's hard to balance that when you have to raise that intensity to such a big rate when everything else has been done.
I think that comes in it as well, Scott, because like Stuart says there, when you're playing in the Champions League, you know you need to perform in the game, so probably training's getting a wee bit sharper, intensity up to that game. I think as well, maybe the way we went out in Munich as well, I think that was a shall I call a kick downstairs to the squad, and I think it took maybe 2 or 3 weeks to really kind of recover for that because that was a humongous effort, and to get that close to potentially qualifying or even get past that that was amazing. Because I actually thought, again, sometimes I'm too realistic for maybe some people's thinking, but I actually thought we were going to go and get battered. I just didn't, as much as we've done okay in other away games at Atlanta and stuff, but I just thought the quality I seen at Celtic Park and Harry Kane, people give Harry Kane a lot of jip, but for me, Harry Kane is unbelievable. I seen it for myself at Celtic Park. His movements just, you think you've got him and you've no. And he always got Celtic Park's just unbelievable movement. So, again, with your Celtic hat and you've got all the faith to go and do it, but your football thinks if they turn up here, we've no chance. But we turned up, they didn't, and we were very unlucky not to get anything out of the game in terms of qualifying. So, I think overall, I'm going to agree with the tweets in terms of intensity, definitely. But again, I go back to what Stuart says there about the January window as well. That for me, again, I don't want to criticise the board because the board up in terms of the model they put in place, in terms of the business side and the money side, it's phenomenal. But he wanted a striker and he didn't get one. He didn't want to play my head up front. He basically told people that. The fact that for me that he still played a Kyogo over Ademida when the chat was he wasn't happy, for me, told me something that he either Ademida was not up to scratch yet or he was developing him. It just didn't, for me, I don't know, shoot, thanks for yourself, but maybe I read between the lines too much, I don't know, but I just didn't like what he said about that in terms of him Ademida. And then I think I'm agreeing with Stuart as well, if you like yourself, if you had a replacement for Kyogo, somebody a bit better than Kenny, or either or the same level with either to come on off the bench, it would give you a bit of difference. So I definitely agree with yourself as well in terms of just put a sub on, just get fresh, let's just try and get a goal. That's the way it did look, and that's just panic. It's just let's try and get us in the line. But I think overall, I think the squad does need people out, people in. But for me, I think they need to buy starters. It's no, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's no squad fillers Celtic need to buy. It's players to come in and make an impact, because like Stuart says there, for me, if Hatate plays and Jota, I think you probably win that game, because they've got especially Jota for me, he's got that touch of class that he's done nothing all game, but then can score a worldie. And I didn't feel we had that at all, even like with James Forrest and Jan came on for me. I think the less I said about Young the better, to be honest with you, Scott. I don't rate him at all. But overall, I think I'm agreeing with Stuart there. It's just one of them, once you've taken the chin, we move on into the summer and just hopefully we can get the manager back and we obviously prepare for these playoffs coming up.
And we'll kind of touch on the kind of striker situation later, because I think it is an interesting one going into the summer, and we can obviously kind of carry out with January and Kyogo and things like that. But Stuart, we have to obviously say it's a league and League Cup double. Europe was a lot better. There's a lot to be positive about.
I definitely, I given if you look at the kind of taking it right back to when Rodgers came back, season before, I think at the start, given the recruitment that summer, given the first half of the season there, I think since then, not always, I think you need to give a manager a lot of credit for that in terms of, I think especially the first 6 months of the season as well, some of the football was probably as good. People just said at times good as maybe as it was at its best under Ange. We got the Leipzig win. Like Ryan says, in terms of Munich, the performance levels there were probably as high as we've seen for a long, long time from a Celtic side in Europe, and there's still work to do in Europe, I think. And obviously it's going to be a task to just get into the Champions League this season coming, but I think it's about another step forward. It's just where do we go from here in terms of Rodgers going into his last season? Does he see his future further? What we building ideally with that in mind? So that there is, and this is in the kind of context that like Ryan mentioned as well, rightly, that there's going to be change across Scottish football in terms of what's happened to Rangers, what's happening at Hearts and Hibs as well. That there's potential going to be and what would be good for Scottish football, of course, to have a much more competitive landscape. So there's all these kind of things going on. So there is as much as it should be settled at the moment in terms of fourth title in a row, double. I think there's still some questions and anxieties as fans as always.
Ryan, I go back to I was talking to a Celtic fan the other day actually, and we were talking about the kind of start of the season, and I go back to that Hearts game round about kind of November time. I think it was just before Bruges, where the first half was like there was literally nothing. It was a poor first half. I think if I remember rightly, I think it was a heat map and he had like 6 touches in the first half, and then the second half just there was something clicked and it was as clinical and convincing a Celtic performance I've seen in a long time. And I felt that was the point where right, the Celtic team are like it's maybe taken to November. The results have been there, but that felt like what Brendan Rodgers had been trying to do since he'd come back. Just get that clinical edge, everybody like on the same hymn sheet. And to me, that was the point where like I thought that was the best Celtic performance I'd seen. I know it's only a half, but that to me was as good as I've seen this season for Celtic.
I think there was a few, well, I say a few, there was a lot of games. I'll say maybe off the top of my head, maybe about 15 games in the league campaign where it was just 45 minutes performances. And again, I know how the high intensity level and how hard it is to play against the low blocks, and maybe some of the parks aren't great and you're played in Europe during the week. I get all that, it comes into the equation, but to play 45 minutes no great, 45 good a lot of the time, for me that I don't know what to make of that. I'm not a fan of it, because if you don't take your chances, maybe in the second half, what you've done the first half, you might have lost the game. Because we've seen it at Dundee as well later on in the season, where we had chances, but that was one of the worst performances I've seen in the season. It was one of Austin Trusty's worst games I've ever seen at Celtic. So we had a few moments like that, I think, in the season. As much as I'm agreeing with Stuart, you can look at the league table and you can listen. It's an unbelievable season in terms of still winning the league by that, and getting the points total we did, and the double. And I agree with you as well, Scott. See, because again, I think that was the manager did mention it against St Johnstone, and I don't know which yourself and Stuart thought it, but or also the viewers as well. But see, when a manager at that level has to tell the players that they're not doing it well enough, or they've got to do it better, or you can't be complacent. For me, as much as this team are winners, there's obviously a few mentally players in there that maybe can't withstand these standards, and maybe because of maybe playing at teams that I'm not saying Engels or Thursday, but I'm just saying because they're new players at Sheffield United or Augsburg, that you don't need to win every week. You can't underperform. You can't drop half your levels, and I think some of them. I think probably not Engels, because he played the next game after that. So there was other guys that dropped out, and I thought that was a reason, because the standards went from that to that, and he went out the team, because you can drop a few levels at Celtic in terms of one or two games, but the consistency, say, like, if just say Rangers were closer and challenging, right? You can't lose 3 and 4 games within the space of 4 or 5 weeks because you might be 6 points behind. So as much as last season was good, and you can't just think it's going to be the same next year because it might not be. Aberdeen might be better, Hibs, Hearts, Rangers might be better. So we'll need to be better as well. And obviously, I think in terms of some of the games, Scott, I think 45 minutes, I agree with you in that game. I'm sure I was at the game, actually, to be fair. It was pretty boring, to be honest with you. And you don't really see that, like Stuart says, with Celtic.
Been horrendous. I think I went and made a cheese toasty or something. I was like full. I was like, good time, and then come back in second half. It was like, that was incredible.
Like Stuart says as well, there was a few performances in the later part of the season where it wasn't a good viewing, but because you were still winning, people they weren't really saying anything. But I've always says bad performances or no high performance eventually lead to poor results. So it's all right still winning, but eventually, if you don't perform with your victory, you will eventually drop points. And we did go through a spell like 2 or 3 weeks where I think St Johnstone and then somebody else, we were really, really poor. And there was a few fans really saying, like, some of these players need to step it up. Even though you're ahead in the league, you still need to step it up. So I do agree with Stuart. There's still obviously questions, i.e. it's probably more for the board to answer in terms of backing the manager with even players in the bench who are good enough to come in and make a massive impact through the full season. But I think Europe's a big thing for me. I feel that Celtic will buy enough players to win the league or be really competitive to challenge anybody. It's Europe for me is the biggest thing where they need to spend a wee bit more money or maybe go a bit braver, as Brendan always says. And I do believe there's still, again, maybe I'm maybe a realist too much, maybe, but I know we've done well last season, but we might not get that draw again. We might not get the teams again. And will we go to Dortmund again and get beat? Will we go back to Atlanta and get beat? Will we go away to Munich and put it again? So if you add to that squad and you add a bit of quality, I would say you probably can. But I think Stuart's right. It's a European thing for us. If we get enough players to do as in Scotland, that then helps you towards obviously being better Europe.
Sure. One thing I really enjoyed this season, just in terms of the kind of Champions League, was I thought the league stage was a lot better for clubs like Celtic, where in that kind of you don't really not that you don't expect, obviously, but I thought a lot of clubs really improved with that kind of level of right. We're not out after 3 games. And that's been the case with Celtic for a few years. Like, you see the likes of kind of Bruges get in, like teams like Feyenoord, Benfica, like PSV, kind of teams you would maybe compare to Celtic in terms of budget, are able to kind of do better in Europe. Do you think the league stage was a kind of big reason that Celtic's performances improved, or was it more of a complete difference in terms of the kind of approach? Because if you look at those 8 games, you would look at like Dortmund and Villa are probably the 2 hardest games, and they turned out to be. But the other games, I thought, I know 3 of them were draws, but Celtic, I thought, were a lot more measured in their European approach. Was it just because there's no that much pressure at the early stage to win? Because let's face it, if you're in the group, if you're in a 6-game group, if you lose your first 2-3 games, you're out. But it's different with this league stage where you're mostly in it until maybe the 7th, 8th game, and I think that's what kind of helped Celtic. I think Young Boys was a good example of that, where the pressure was off going into Villa game, and that would never happen in a group stage.
No, I think it was probably a bit of both. I think obviously in general, like Ryan kind of mentioned there, that it was a favourable draw. Fixtures were pretty favourable as well. To have Slovan first game, and you were able to build up a bit of momentum. But I think it was also, you could see improvement from the season before, because as much as it wasn't a great season before, it obviously ended well that season. Europe was actually, as much as wasn't successful, but the performances were there. There was already a bit of improvement in terms of you obviously went and had the result and performance in Dortmund this season, but there wasn't those kind of hammerings. It was it seemed like what was the kind of issue with Andrews, a lack of kind of control.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like Rodgers would be able to get that in, and we've seen that on a few occasions going to Atlanta and getting a clean sheet. Again in terms of the Munich tie as well, going to somewhere like the Allianz Arena and being so, competitive and but well structured and as well. So yeah, I think it was a wee bit of both. I think that in general, I think that kind of format is better, and it's better for teams like say like Celtic. So you're hoping that given it should be seeded that, and it's just the one tie that got a good chance of getting there again. And I think that's a big, I think you can look at Europa League as potentially a more opportunity to go deeper, but I think Champions League, certainly the board would still favour that, and I think Rodgers would. That's the top level in Europe, and in terms of the players you can attract as well. Champions League's a massive sell for a club like Celtic when you've not got, maybe the most competitive league. You're not playing in the biggest stadiums week in week out. So it's an important part, as Ryan said, Europe and particularly Champions League and making an impact. So hopefully, as we said, in terms of getting that back and that they can take that next step this season coming, ideally qualifying, but then going and perhaps getting that first knockout tie again and being able to see if we can get through that.
Ryan, what kind of positives do you take for the European performances? Because I think, as Stuart says, I think a lot more structured, a lot more control, and that kind of the 8 games I think gave Celtic a kind of far better opportunity to really kind of stick into it until the kind of later stages.
I thought it was pretty positive, yeah. It's in terms of results wise as well, it was really positive. The game at Atalanta for me was probably the biggest positive, because I predict this as again. I did predict this in my head. I was thinking, right, we're going to go over there and not really do well because you've seen the form Atalanta was in. I don't want to say the guy's name because I get it wrong, but the boy up front was phenomenal up to that game in the Serie A. He was phenomenal. He missed a few chances actually against us, but we defended really, really well. We adapted. Rodgers shows he can adapt to certain formations or certain players. He did play a bit more defensive, but then we went up front. It went back to the 4-3-3, or if you want to call it the 5 up front, depending on how you look at formations. But we definitely adapted and we did do well. We probably could have, when you look back at some of the chances, I think it was Nicholas Kuhn missed one, we probably could have won the game as well in the second half. So I would say Europe's probably, I actually think that the way Brendan wants to play, it might actually suit us Europe. I think it's more having to come back, maybe coming back for Europe and then having to do it domestically. Maybe, again, I think even any ex-Rangers player, Aberdeen player, any ex-player who's played in Europe will tell you, when you go and maybe play against a high-level opponent and you come back to Scotland, it's a wee bit of come down, and then you need to go and do it again. And just see Celtic play Bayern Munich, and then they need to go to, just say next season, Falkirk or Tony Mack, it's -3, Baltic, it's a massive come down from maybe going from there to there. So, but again, listen, I know people say that's what they're paid for and they're paid the high wages for it, but it is a mentality switch. You're like Stuart says, yourself, the intensity. You're playing Barcelona, intensity play Barcelona, and then you come down to them playing Ross County or St Mirren. I know Ross County's down now, but that sort of team, and that's no, for me, that's no disrespect. That's just reality. You're going from one outcome to another outcome. So, but I think Europe, I would say, pretty decent. The fact we got through that format, I think it suits us. I'm happy with it because you could get another favourite or you might not. But having the first game at home, I don't know if Stuart was at the game himself, but I was at the game myself, and it could have been more than 5. I didn't rate Bratislava one bit. I thought the boy up front, we liked him.
Yes,
Strelec. Yeah, he was probably a standout, to be fair. He looked pretty decent. Apart from that, I thought we were pretty comfortable. It was 5, maybe going on 10 or so. So that was a good start for us. I think if we had maybe a harder game to start off with, it might have derailed us a wee bit. I think getting that victory in the Champions League, and I think it was 5-0, wasn't it? A really good performance. So that kicked you on, I think, and got to that. I think, but Dortmund as well might have been a bit of a reality check for us, thinking, right, maybe we can't go to these teams and play like that. And I actually think ever since Dortmund, for the rest of the year, we were brilliant. I know we had the 1 or 2 games in November, but we were pretty comfortable. But I think we're pretty notorious, especially when about January, end of December to maybe February. I couldn't tell you the last time, even with Ange, apart from the game we beat Rangers at Celtic Park, where we've been really, really good. It always hits that bit of where we've been really fortunate that we've carried that lead on, and we've had a few blips, but it's going to happen. You can't play 90 minutes every week and be amazing. So, but I think next year's the biggest thing for me. I think Celtic fans might be the same. Obviously, it's continuing the league and winning any cup we can. But I think it's not just being competitive now. We've shown we can be competitive. It's probably, again, if you want to put it to the board or the recruitment team, it's the money merit Celtic giving the manager quality players he wants to maybe enhances to get to potentially pass into this knockout phase and win a knockout game, because I think you've probably get a manager to do it. It just depends on if you can get the recruitment to do it. And I think that's for me, that's the biggest thing with Celtic, Europe and the league. If Celtic do the recruitment right, I don't think they'll need to look that way. It's all positive going that way.
Yeah, I want to kind of touch on quite a few kind of players and a few kind of positions that I think are interesting come the summer. Like, I think if you ask a lot of Celtic fans, like, who was the player of the season, we know it's Maeda, but I think it's very interesting. First half of the season, I thought Nicholas Kuhn was unplayable. He kind of dipped a wee bit, and then kind of once Kuhn dipped, this level that Daizen Maeda went to was unbelievable. Like, it's a weird situation where, like, Maeda, I think, he's probably 33 goals in all competitions, a tremendous return. But I'm going to ask you kind of two questions in one. Kuhn's start and then the way kind of fell off a wee bit, and just how much has Maeda improved. Like, it's two really interesting ways to look at the season. Like, when you look at it from that perspective.
In terms of Kuhn, I remember when done the button up for the Celtic way when he signed, being pretty excited about him, and then obviously had that for 6 months, and it's like maybe it's me, I have no idea to spot a player, but obviously you just kind of seen that he'd been at been at Bayern, been at Leipzig, been in Ajax, been in big European clubs academies, so there's obvious talent there. And maybe what we've seen at Celtic is kind of why he's not maybe hit those heights, that that it doesn't seem. I don't know if there's a full season in him, just maybe the way he's kind of built, or he seemed to kind of for that first 6 months he looked like the issues that were well, like, wasn't robust enough, wasn't confident in taking his man on. We've seen all that, but then it kind of almost went back into his shell a wee bit second half of the season. So maybe that's part of the reason why he's not ended up at Celtic. You know what I mean? Like, why his career's maybe not hit the heights that I think a lot of maybe the clubs that had him at those ages would have thought. So he is an interesting one. Obviously, there's a lot of talk that he could be on the move.
Think he will. Think he will.
I think that would, if that does come to pass, then that would probably make sense for the second half of the season. You could maybe see some sort of, head turned or whatever you want to call it, but, just a distraction. And I think if that is, then so be it. 18 months, I think after the first 6 months, if you should sell them for, you presume, a reasonable fee, you'd be fairly happy with that. But like you say, and it is a really interesting, and it all kind of ties into the Ida thing as well, with Maeda as well moving in there. I think Maeda, I'd always been a fan of Maeda, even again, that maybe first season or season and a half, the stuff off the ball, and you just need to watch, Champions League final. How much we're talking about off the ball, and that it's such a big part of modern football.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, there's amazing attacking talents all over it. Maeda's a separate thing, but when you can marry those two things, I think that's what we've seen a wee bit with Maeda. Is we always, it was, if he could actually play football, like that, I would never have been that harsh, but that was what people would say. It was his pressing, it was his closing down, his physical attributes. But I think there was always enough there, enough, ability, going forward as well. It's just he added a bit of composure, added, just a wee bit. It's just taking those wee bits to then, you've got that package and you're like, wow, he's still maybe not got a left foot, but he's still not going to be, as you've seen, he had, those two one-on-ones. You had the one at Ibrox, who could have got the win there, and then obviously the one in the cup final. So I think he's always going to, he's never going to, be absolutely flawless in front of goal. But it's quite a complicated one to, I think Maeda would be the one you would not want to lose. I think if Kuhn was to go, I think you could go, yeah, right, okay. But I think Maeda would lose so much more. And that's not to say Kuhn's work off the ball when he was certainly at his best was good as well. So I'm always kind of liked about him as well. So I like to say interesting that Kuhn was the one who had the good start and probably Celtic are playing better. But the second half of the season, I think, it's nowhere near as maybe even probably still comfortable in terms of the league, but in terms of even the Scottish Cup, just getting to the final, was the top scorer in that competition, scored in every round up to the final. And I say that, we're left so short, we're not going and getting that other striker that, it had to be Maeda. And as much as he played there for Japan and he played there early, he hadn't really played there at all for Celtic much until Kyogo left. And again, like Ryan kind of touched on earlier, he didn't say a lot for Ida either, so that he was preferred. I think both the Bayern Munich ties, he started in front of him, at Ibrox as well, maybe, or the Derby game at Christmas or whatever. So I think he'd be the one you wouldn't want to lose. And Kuhn, I would obviously love to keep Kuhn, and again in our pre-season under him, would probably be a fantastic asset to have. And we've not got, if we were to lose somebody like Kuhn, then you'd start looking pretty light in the wings. So Jota being out as well till probably towards the end of the year. So it's those. I think it'd be those attacking areas. I think there's other areas of the park that will need to be looked at, obviously, but those attacking areas are the side, centre forward, and wingers, and how that all ties in with Maeda and that. That'll be I would imagine that'd be pretty much priority for the manager.
Ryan, I think obviously like when Kyogo was sold, I think there was even though Jota came in, I think there was an assumption that a striker would be brought in, and I don't know. Like, I know the name, is it Kritzgard, the one that he seems to be just getting mentioned constantly. There's even a report today that he's been mentioned. So I think that's a kind of rumour that's not going away. But the form of Maeda, did that kind of mask the need for a striker? Because Ida was obviously a big buy, and we know he did do very well last season and has come up. I mean, he's 20 goals this season. His tally's still decent. But Maeda's form, did that kind of like hide the fact that Celtic still do need that Kyogo replacement? Because Maeda's, yes, his IQ is not as good as Kyogo and his move, but like as Stuart mentions, his pressing is very good. His finishing's miraculously improved. I think Maeda is probably, as maybe take away McGregor and Carter Vickers, probably the most important player Celtic have.
Yeah, I'm somewhat as Stuart in terms of his first half, say first season and a half, he was kind of kicking balls over the Forest Market. You're thinking, right, but then he's pinging one in the attack corner. It was like it was up and down. Again, I totally get what Stuart's saying, and he's not been disrespectful. It's if he had if it's like a technical football brain, what sounds disrespectful. What I mean is, if he was technically very good, say like a Jota or a Kuhn, I don't think he beat Celtic. I think he's that good off the ball. He's press, his speed, he's fit, he's an absolute athlete. And I think if you're like that now in football, I think you'll probably get by even more now than you will because of your technical ability. I think if you're an athlete now, you're more entitled to get big moves or get a contract because of that side of the game. But I'm agreeing with Stuart as well. I think Maeda's probably every big player's important that scores goals. I know Nicholas Kuhn got over 20 goals as well, but in terms of Maeda, I'd probably say if you had a choice, if you had to sell one, I think I would probably go with Nicholas Kuhn because I don't think Celtic can buy a winger like Maeda. Maybe better ability wise, But in terms of the other side of the game, you need to go and maybe buy somebody for but the belly for PSG last night, that sort of level, because that's what he provides for Celtic. So, Nicholas Kuhn, I'm agreeing with Stuart, his first 6 months or so, he was unplayable. He was absolutely phenomenal. Quick, agility, scoring, assisting. Had a smile on his face, and then I don't know if it was because Jota came in and that was a big money signing, and he's thinking, right, now I've got competition now, because Kyogo was normally going to play up front. It was Maeda and Kuhn. Either be maybe swap with Maeda. Forrest would play the odd game. Young would play the odd game. It was always really A2 because we were playing really well. And like you say, after that game in November, we just clicked with A2 wide as well. So I kind of did mask it, but I still say again, fans might agree with me, and they might not agree because he won the double. It doesn't really matter now, but I still say that if Celtic were just in front, just say 3 points, 5 points in the league, or we were behind the league, there was not a chance Kyogo Furuhashi would leave Celtic.
No.
Not a chance in a million years was he leaving Celtic. So for me, it was a wee tad complacent that they sold him without a replacement. But listen, it's worked out in the end, and you can't be too critical, but it's something, as Stuart says, it's a question that you need to put to the board. That can't happen again. You need to be prepared for, because just again, it's different money, scenarios, right? But you look at Aston Villa, they sold Duran. Within 3 days, I've got Marcus Rashford and Marco Asensio in the door. I know it's different money, I get it all, but they've obviously been on the Aston Villa's recruitment list. Like, if he goes, we'll go and get him. And at Celtic, it didn't seem that there was a viable, proper somebody to come in right away. There was talk about loan deals for Danny Ings and Fitz's Garden, how much money is it going to cost to get him in the summer instead. But it's turned out in the main, we can talk about it and debate about it, but it's just something to keep an eye on for maybe in the future. But it's still an absolute positive season for me. It's just all about progression and adding to it now. You can't be negative, you can't look back. Yes, you've lost the treble, but you won a double, you won the league with so many points. And again, it might sound cocky, it might sound too confident, but you want to then go to 18 points, 20 points, go and sign that big £15 million maybe striker or something. Go and show a statement to the rest of Scottish football that because they've got a bit of takeover, Rangers have got a takeover, Aberdeen are getting that money, Hearts will get Tony Bloom involved. Let's go and spend a bit of my money. But I'd probably say if you had the choice, I'd say Maeda would probably have to be kept. But I do believe we will sell a big asset. I think the club potentially maybe need to keep that freshness, because I think some of the players, Stuart might agree with me, but I think some of the players are maybe their cycle's just getting to them now. And I think it happened with Liverpool when they won the league a few years ago with Klopp. They didn't really sign anybody next season. I think Man City done the same, and they went still. Their squad just it wasn't the same. And I think at Celtic, we can't stay still. We still need to improve. And I do believe we'll do that because we've got the financial implications to stretch it a bit more. And I think it's a very interesting season for Celtic and I know. But I think it's a major season, especially for Europe, because if we do strengthen for the European side, I don't think you even need to look behind you at all.
Stuart, I think we could probably spend another hour on this subject, but we're going to try and kind of cut it down to about 2 or 3 minutes. We know Cameron Carter-Vickers is pretty much irreplaceable in that Celtic back line, but does Brendan Rodgers really know who's the best partner for him at the moment? Because it seems as if that the whole season it's been Trusty's been in and out. Scales is obviously Rodgers obviously likes Scales, and like I imagine it's his kind of presence in the ball retention. Nawrocki I thought did fine, but then just got completely cast aside. Like the tale of the partner to Carter Vickers is one that I think we could probably spend an hour on.
Well, like, he thought he had, like, in terms of Trusty, he thought that was the partner for him because it seemed that him and Ida were the two that he pushed for. And with Trusty, we've just not seen it. Not, probably on a par with Scales, maybe a wee bit. I think Trusty a wee bit quicker. Scales maybe a wee bit more trust on. It seems to have a wee bit more trust in him with the ball, but it's going to be interesting because you don't see Trusty being moved on, don't see Scales being moved on. You'd probably seen Nawrocki move on. The only central defender being linked with seems to be the young guy at still Belgrade. So he wouldn't be coming over expecting to play. I think it was 17, 18 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously really well thought of, and would be expecting game time, but not to play, week in, week out. Really interesting what happens with that one. I think, um, Nawrocki, you'd think would be moved on again. You wonder what he's done, but I think he's more suited on the right. So, he's not going to displace Carter Vickers. So that's maybe, and he has got a wee bit of attitude in terms of his physicality, in the air and stuff as well. But he's always looked really good in the ball, and in terms of his other defender, looked competent enough. So, another interesting one. Probably, again, I think the attacking areas will be where the club will look to strengthen first, or certainly put the most kind of weight behind it in terms of budget, and rightly so. But that's interesting what happens here as well, because he has, like you say, he's kind of flirted back and forth between the two of them. Neither is really, like Ryan mentioned, the performance trusted at Dundee, really not really good at all. And Scales, for as much as you've said, I think it's always kind of been a ceiling to Scales. So, and again, that's not disrespectful. I don't think it's just that Rodgers wouldn't have went out and spent 6 million on Trusty if he didn't feel Scales was up to it, and that's what he's done. So I don't know what happens there. I think it's interesting. I think there'll probably be interest in Carter Vickers again. Whether he can fend that off again will be whether I think his injuries maybe almost work in Celtic's favour in that regard. But I think if you were to take him out of the heart of that defence, you would really start to worry about that area of the park.
Ryan, I think Austin Trust is a very fascinating thing, because I go back a couple of games that stand out where his weaknesses were kind of exposed a wee bit. I thought the cup final against Rangers, I thought he was poor, to be honest. I thought Falkirk was another one. But then you look at his performance in Atalanta and you thought he was exceptional. So there's obviously a level of performance there. It's just, is the consistency there? I don't think he's written off. I do think he will get time. It's just, can he find that level of consistency that Scales has? But I don't think the level of performance, as Stuart mentions, I think there's a ceiling to Scales. There probably isn't with Trusty, but I think Scales has the edge consistency. It's just a weird situation that is one of those that I don't think will be a massive concern in the summer, but it's one of those that'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm
probably going to agree with Stuart as well in terms of Vickers. His injuries might play in our favour, but I think he played about 40 games last year. I don't think he missed a lot. I think if we sell Carter Vickers, then I think you're worrying, because you then probably need to go and buy 2 top drawer centre backs, and that costs you money. You probably need to spend 20 million or 25 million pounds to a centre backs probably for the level of Carter Vickers. Because for me, Carter Vickers is if you want to say, maybe 10, 12 position Premier League defender, in my opinion. I think he's top. I think he could go and play with a Bournemouth or an Everton, and I think he would look at a place. So I think he's been our shining light in defence personally. You've got to remember as well, for me, you're probably going to have the signing in the summer, Kieran Tierney come to Celtic. For me, that's an unbelievable signing. Obviously, we'll touch on that when we touch on him, Scott. But so you're going to have to precise somebody that might not be Carter Vickers level, but somebody that's a steady enough level next to him, because next to they two, I think you'll look at Maldini at Celtic, because the two are that good. So for me, I'm not here to slander people, but for me, I don't think Scales is good enough to play with Celtic in 11. I think he's a squad player at best. I counted 7 mistakes in the first 12 minutes in the cup final on Sunday, and he puts you under pressure too much. I agree that he's maybe more confident on the ball to Trusty, but for me, anytime I've seen Nawrocki play, apart from 1 or 2 fresh air kicks at Hearts at home, he's been absolutely fine. He's been dominant in the air. He's 1-2 crisp passes. He's always wanted to play forward. He might be a wee bit frigid in terms of pace, but if he's playing next to Carter Vickers, then I don't think he needs a lot of pace, because Vickers will be able to help him, and then you've Tierney and Johnson as well. So personally, sorry guys, I'd probably tend to keep Nawrocki. Personally, I don't think he's done anything wrong, not to be there. I'm agreeing with Stuart. Whatever's happened behind the scenes, if it's injury worries, fitness issues, if it's attitude, if it's no following programmes, whatever it is he's done wrong, he's not done it on the park. Because any time I've seen Dorofsky play, he's looked assured. I'm not saying that he's looked Celtic quality every week, but he's definitely looked a player that can come in against your St Mirrens, your Motherwells, well, here's a thing you'll put to you as well, Scott, on the viewers as well. See the game against Aberdeen, that if you want to call it a B team or that sort of team, see if that was your first time watching Celtic in a long time, would you have thought Dorofsky was a starter? Probably no.
I don't think he's fit for. I don't think he's fit for
That's
Rob.
what I mean. So,
and it's the same with Lagerbielke as well. Like,
yeah,
I don't think they did anything where I'm like, right, I would think, oh, they're not Celtic players. It's just I think there's obviously a manager thing. They're doing something that doesn't.
I've got a feeling they're not his signings, you know, win them. That's just my opinion. I could be absolutely
I think
wrong.
You can say that about most of those players in that window.
I just, because Lagerbielke was playing in front of Starfelt when he came to Celtic Sweden. Dorofsky was getting talked up in the Polish media to be the next big thing in Poland. And again, maybe it takes this season for Dorofsky to be better. I don't know, but I do believe that I think we need to go and sign a top centre back if Picker stays, because are we going to improve personally with skills in the team in Europe? That's what I'm looking at Europe. Probably no.
I think Trusty and Scales together is an absolute no-no.
Aye. Well, again, no, you're trying to be positive, but see when Scales next to Taylor, or it's Slip next to Scales, Celtic get talented. The left-hand side for me is the weakest part of Celtic. It might not show that to some people, but probably if you look at all the data and you look at everything, every team targets that side. But when it was like Trusty or like Slip, it didn't, for me, it's when Scales played next to Taylor, it was always direct over to them. But I guarantee you next year when Tierney's there, no matter if it's Scales or Trusty or Dorofsky or whoever it is, I don't think they'll target that side because of KT's there, because he's just a different level. But I think you're right, Scott, you could probably spend 2 days on this topic, because it's why does he like Scales? Why does he like Trusty? Why is he not playing Dorofsky? Why is Dave Murray been brought back in? I know he got injured, but he was doing okay with Queen's Park, but he wasn't shouting for the rooftop. So I think that will be a question for the recruitment team this summer to see what happens there.
Stuart, obviously we mentioned the Celtic's already kind of got a left back in the summer, the return of Kieran Tierney. I was mentioning to somebody the other day, to sell somebody for 25 million quid at 22, 23 and get them back at 27 for free, I think it's an incredible bit of business. The thing with Kieran Tierney is, we're not knocking that his quality is absolutely apparent, but I don't think even Brendan Rodgers thinks that Kieran Tierney, you can have Kieran Tierney as a stable first choice option all season. Yes, the quality is absolutely clear to see, but we know the fitness issues. So how does that work? Because we've got the situation with Greg Taylor. I don't know about Jeffrey Schultz coming back on a permanent basis. I think that's one of those where you don't have somebody of the quality of Kieran Tierney to bring in, but you have to have backup there, because we know the issues that could arise with Tierney.
Yeah, you ideally want two really good options in every position in the park, regardless. Obviously it's heightened with around Tierney's injuries, and that'll need to be managed. Yeah, not always been good at that at Celtic. So hopefully that will be managed. And it's then interesting who that second is. I think Schlupp looked okay when he came in, but you got to remember he hadn't played left back in a long time since he came up here on loan. So I don't think that's a great fit. I don't think it'll probably be value for money, even if it's on a free. In terms of the wages, he could probably go and get somewhere else. I think Taylor seems like is going to move on as well. So it's just that kind of profile. I think you've seen the Peterborough left back, getting somebody who's kind of out of contract, still quite young, so might need a development fee or something. It's maybe somebody like that, but it's still somebody of a standard. I know there's some younger guys in the kind of setup in terms of Anderson and things as well, who might come into it. Obviously we've seen some that has been a wee bit of a bugbear for me, not seeing as many young players coming through. I think I say that regardless, but I think in particular, especially when, what we've talked about a lot earlier tonight in terms of, having the league wrapped up so early, we didn't see enough until, we've seen a bit of McCardle, but we need to see a bit more of that. So maybe there's an opportunity for somebody to come in, somebody within the kind of club already to come in as a kind of backup to Tierney. But I would think they would go and get somebody else. So it's just what that profile is. But regardless whether he's got injuries or not, you'd still expect him. You want to come back here and kind of put that to bed. I think he's been pretty much injury free since he got back. With Arsenal, who's obviously just not had a huge amount of game time. He'll want to put that to bed. He's still, he's still young enough to go and have 5, 6, 7 years career at top level. Hopefully that entire time with Celtic. So, but he'll want to come back and be back part, or I think he want to be making and that's obviously why he's been convinced to come back, because again, pretty sure he wouldn't have been short options on a free as well. So, interesting who that second left back or competition is going to be for him.
Right, and obviously with Tierney, we mentioned about the fitness issues, but one thing we can guarantee is if you can get 30, 40 games and he's at his best, which we've seen he can be, like I think Arsenal's obviously an interesting one because his injury issues did massively affect him, but when he was playing, he was on it. But it's finding that balance, and I think Greg Taylor's interesting because I think if you'd said in January, I think there was absolutely no chance he was re-signing. But if you'd said to me maybe a month ago, it seemed pretty likely that there was a contract going about. So I think that's an interesting one. But where are you at with the Taylor situation? Like, if he was to stay, is he going to be happy being second best?
Probably not, I would say, Scott. Obviously, as well, I think Greg Taylor's, 27, 28,
They're
roughly?
the same age, yeah.
Yeah, obviously, he's now a new dad, and he's obviously happily married now and stuff. So he, as Rodgers said as well, he'll need to think about his next career in terms of contract-wise as well, because players these days, as much as I don't think players at 31, 32, etc. are old, in terms of big money moves, that's the way football's going. So I'm no Greg Taylor's biggest fan, but in terms of Scottish football, I think he's absolutely fine. I think he's an able backup as well for Europe. If KT was your main left back, so if Celtic can get a deal done, it saves you money as well in buying somebody who potentially could be a gamble. Every signing can be a gamble. So if you did get Greg Taylor signed up, if it's a 2-year deal, 3-year deal, whatever it is, on obviously terms that Celtic happy with and he's happy with, I think he will get a day. I don't think anybody gets assurances, but I think he'll know that he'll get a bit of game time, knowing that potentially Kieran Tierney, for me, probably has to play every European game.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the week, if it's putting Greg Taylor on 60 minutes, KT on, then like Stuart says, if that's the way they need to do it, they need to manage because obviously the COVID season, obviously different circumstances, but Scott Brown wasn't managed, and I think if Scott Brown was managed, we might have seen a better Scott Brown. So I think Celtic need to manage Kieran Tierney, but maybe I'm trying to be as positive as I can on this, but I think he'll play a lot more than some fans think. I think he's been really, really fit for a long time, as Stuart says there. He's still training at a high level. He's only been picking up any knocks. I seen the game against Southampton. He was different class. I think he played as a front three at the Emirates, and be brilliant. So I think he's going to. I think some fans really like Greg Taylor, and I'm like, just wait to see this guy play. Greg Taylor's good, but wait to see this guy play. For me, it's going to be, unless we go and spend mega bucks, for me in terms of quality wise, I get Cooper to sign in the summer because I think he's, again, people might shoot me down and say I'm maybe talking nonsense, but I think he was borderline world class when he was at his point with Arsenal. He was talking about Real Madrid going from, for me, if he's fully fit, for me, he's a phenomenal player. So I can't wait to see him again. I'm actually pinch myself to see him again at Celtic Park because I didn't think I'd ever see him back at this age. Maybe like 33, 34, but maybe in terms of footballing wise, I know he's had injuries, but he's maybe his peak age in terms of footballing wise. So, like you say, he might want to come here and say, listen, I'm fit, I want to I'll show you all that I'm here to be fit. So no, I'm looking forward to it, and I think it'll add a different dynamic to the Celtic team because he's one of the last typical old-fashioned left backs, just up and down, up and down, up and down, and I think especially for Europe, we miss it.
I wanted to just finally before we wrap up, I just wanted to touch on midfield quickly because I feel as if we've not even mentioned Engels, McGregor, Hatate, but like Stuart, I think midfield seems to be a kind of interesting thing. Like there's a lot of pressure on Engels for obvious reasons of the fee. I remember saying at the start of the season in various different shows, like if Hatate has a strong season, I think it's absolutely inevitable he will leave. I don't know if that's the case now. McCowan and Bernardo, I think, have been fine, but I think they still need to step up a gear. Where do you think midfield's at? Because I'm kind of more interested in that. Because imagine if an offer comes in for Hatate, I'd imagine they would cash in. I think it seemed like a kind of year plan from last summer. Engels, is he ready to kind of step up and kind of take that massive role? Because it feels at time, I think Rodgers done quite a good job with Engels in terms of kind of nursing him in, knowing the pressures there. Where would you say midfield's at? Is there maybe more to be brought in moving forward?
And if I thought was to go in, yeah, obviously that those kind of the two number eights. I think for me it's the kind of base at midfield with McGregor. It's what we've talked about it for a number of years now in terms of you know cover competition, whatever you want to call it. But McGregor's not going to be able to continue to play 40, 50 games a season. So and we've seen the issues in the game, the Rangers game at Celtic Park in terms of Engels going back there that he was not suited to that. Just really quickly, I thought Engels has done pretty well, maybe not as well as what people expected given the fee, but given he's still only 21, he's only played I think started about 13 games for Augsburg the season before, so that's all have been a massive step up for him this season, in terms of the kind of standard, but in terms of that, the physicality and what it takes to play 2 or 3 games a week at the level expected in Celtic being on the ball as much as that. So I think we'll see more from him next season. I think he'll be even more important if somebody like Hatate were to go, because I would imagine it wouldn't be another £11 million player that would replace Hatate. I think maybe go somebody a wee bit kind of cheaper, a wee bit kind of younger in that area. But for me, I'll be looking at that number 6 and what I quite liked it. Tomoki Iwata. I think he would have probably played a lot more minutes than people might have thought this season if we had held on to him. It's obviously easy saying that in hindsight when he goes on as a fantastic season for Birmingham and they get promoted. I think regardless, I think he would have still been somebody handy to have around the squad and would have played a decent amount of minutes. But manager obviously didn't think he's probably right in terms of he wasn't going to ever be enough to take the mantle up from McGregor in terms on the ball. It's going to be really rare to find that if at all possible. But I think there needs to be a bit more of an effort on who's the next number, who's first choice, who's the first after McGregor in that number 6. Because tried Engels there, Bernardo's played there. Maybe Bernardo is more suited to that, but then he needs to get more opportunities in that area. So that'd be the part of midfield I'd be more interested in, and hoping to see something done there. I know there was the links with the guy in Toulouse, I think it was. Or was it Toulouse? Another team in France in the second tier. A really big kind of physical presence. So we've talked about that's been talked about before. But it needs to be somebody who's good on the ball, who can start around from deep in the mould of McGregor. So that in terms of midfield, that for me is a kind of priority.
Ryan, could the answer to that question Stuart's asking be Sean McArdle? Or is it way too early to make that assumption? Because I was really impressed with him. It's even B team and youth. I remember our youth league game. I was very impressed with him. I think if you're managed right, maybe a loan spell could help him. I think we could be looking at a real find here.
On obviously the young boy, like you say, McArdle, I think if he's managed properly and get a bit more game time, like Stuart says, when the league was kind of wrapped up, he came on against Aberdeen, looked decent, and then that was him at the team, on the squad for the next 2 games after that, which is then the manager's then saying there's a pathway. If I'm a young player looking at that, I'm thinking, well, where's the pathway? I've come on for 15, 17 minutes, so some nice touches. I think he set up one of the goals, the touch for, I think, was it Eder's goal?
Yeah.
And then he's it might be to keep him grounded, right? You've had a wee shot, go back, train hard, you'll get another one. But if somebody does well, keep playing him, because the minute he trains with these guys and plays in this stature arenas and players, he's going to get stronger and get bigger. So, was he 16 the way it is? 16?
And see that angle, see that angle, and like when managers say, like, if it is like keeping them grounded, I get it to a degree, but we're also in the kind of age where a 17-year-old is one of the best players in the planet at the moment. And do you know what I mean? It's like if you think they're good enough to be in the side, why are you playing them for 15 minutes and then 20?
It probably is a bit early to put him in the team, but he either should go away to, if it's a top team in the Championship or a bottom half of the Premiership, just say St Mirren or something like they did with Quan, then. But he's got to get insurances he's going to be playing, because there's no point in him going and sitting on the bench and no playing. So midfield for me, I like McKibben, but I think he's maybe got enough quality for Scotland. I think in Europe, I think we maybe did a bit better. Bernardo, I'm the same with Stuart. I think he's a bit more game time. I do like him. I think he's got everything in his locker, but he's had a few injuries. Maybe he's goes away in Portugal this summer because back a better player. I'm a massive fan of Engels. I think the criticism he's been getting has been pretty uncalled for.
I think it's just price tag.
Possibly, because like Stuart says, if you actually look at his stats for Augsburg, he wasn't really a goal scorer, didn't really do many assists. He's probably his best career numbers wise. I'm sure I've seen a stat, or I can't mean if it was on a Celtic podcast I watched, and they put up a stat that Cam McGregor made his debut roughly about 21-20 with Celtic. And if Engels had the numbers McGregor had, if McGregor had the numbers Engels had in his first year, you'd be saying, oh, what a debut season that boy said. So I think it is probably a price tag, but I think Engels has got a massive ceiling. I think he's got everything in his locker. People say he's no physical. I've seen him a few times going through people. I just think it's coaching. I just think it's like Stuart says, getting used to this standard in terms of playing maybe 2-3 times a week, playing Europe every second week or third week, having to play at high intensity levels. You need to win every game. New culture, new club. I think next year, again, people can maybe bookmark this and tell me I was wrong, but I think next year he'll be a massive play for Celtic. I think he's got that creative spot where I think at least twice a game he puts the diagonal balls or the balls right round to the strikers, and it's lovely to watch. And I'm a massive fan of Engels, and again, he has been missing, shall I say, in a few games, but I think it is a price tag, and I think it's because he's came from a foreign country and thinking, right, he's be coming here and being brilliant right away. Why is he not coming here with big money? And I think next year you'll see the best of him. But I think midfield, for me, I personally think Celtic are too nice all over the park. I think it might sound crazy, but I think they're too technical. I think they're too tippy-tappy. I think they're too attacking. I think we're needing that, if you've back to it, a Wanyama type player who's a bit nastiness, the dirty side of the game, the experienced side of the game, but good on the ball, as Stuart says. So I think we're missing that. No McGregor, no Bernardo, no Engels. If you want to call it a big man mountain in the park, just somebody to get their elbows out and get their bum out. Just, basically. I don't know what to swear, but I am aye.
Better when I do it. It's my, do you know what I mean? It's
basically a dirty bastard, basically, mate. Aye. But obviously, in reason, no fouling people in bad ways, no injuring, but because that's what I think we miss, especially the derby games. I think like years ago, Scott Brown used to make a tackle and the fans would go up there, and I think we're missing a bit of that. People might think that's crazy because we've been successful, but I think there's wee small things we're missing. I think if you get somebody like that in the team to go away, McGregor, Engels, and maybe another player, I think the midfield then starts to shape up, but I think the midfield does need a bit of surgery.
On that note, folks, we are going to wrap up the show there. It's been an absolute pleasure to do this for the season. We'll be back next season a little bit more consistently to try and get some analysis every week. To my two guests this week, it's been an absolute pleasure. Stuart Ross, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
And Ryan Clifford, always a pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Cheers, Scott. Thanks.
Brilliant. And thank you very much for tuned in. We'll see you next season.